Okay, so I think we're good to go. So good morning again to everyone, and thank you for joining us today for the third masterclass in our masterclass series. We've got two more sessions to follow, but today's focus will be on how to measure customer sentiment. We'll be covering multiple topics today and have some really good insight for you to digest and take away. So our agenda for today will be a welcoming introduction with myself, Connor. We'll then be talking about NPS and looking at the ultimate litmus test with Discount Coffee, where we'll hear firsthand how Discount Coffee have put NPS and customer satisfaction at the heart of their business and the results that they've achieved. We'll then be shifting focus to AI. Now, AI has fundamentally transformed the review management landscape, erasing the friction points of the past. Focus must now shift to navigating and mastering these tools. Charlie, our data product manager here at Feefo, will cover this further. We'll then be hosting a Q&A at the end of today's session, and we'll have the chat open for any questions that come up. So please do feel free to get involved, and we'll do our very best to answer as many of these as possible. So just to introduce our speakers today, to start with, we have myself, Connor, and I'm the head of customer success here at Feefo. I've been at Feefo for just over 6 years now, and have seen firsthand how powerful a customer's voice can be. I'm passionate about more than just a star rating, and I'm dedicated to advocacy, value, and helping businesses to drive change. I'm joined today by Charlie Newman, who is our data product manager here at Feefo, and Zach Chiswell, who's the operations and innovation director at Discount Coffee, one of Feefo's clients. So who are Feefo? Feefo work with over 6.5 global brands and want to ensure that every insight comes from real people linked to real purchases. Feefo eliminates the noise of fraudulent feedback and provide businesses and consumers with authentic feedback that simply means more. Rather than acting as subjective critics, Feefo positions itself as the guardian of truth, protecting the transparency of the marketplace. This commitment creates a powerful cycle of trust, allowing brands to lead with honesty. Feefo builds the value of confidence necessary for consumers to make informed decisions, ultimately cementing Feefo's reputation as the gold standard in customer reviews. So as previously mentioned, this is our third masterclass in the series, and today we'll be focusing on how to measure customer sentiment. And just to shout out, as with our previous masterclasses, we will also be releasing a best practice guide, which will help recap today's session and dive into all of the topics that we've covered. You'll also be able to access the recording of today's masterclass, as well as our previous two sessions on the Feefo website, and we'll pop a link into the chat on where you can find these. So to get us started today, we're going to explore the topic of customer sentiment further and how you can measure this. So customer sentiment goes past the star rating and is a mechanism that measures the emotions, opinions, and loyalty of your customers. Measuring customer sentiment allows you to get a holistic and deeper view of how your business is performing. Unlocking this will enable you to quickly identify pain points from your customers so you can align your teams internally to make change with the overall goal of making improvements to your products, services, and produce stronger, more positive outcomes for your customers, ultimately leading them to become loyal advocates of your business and driving retention and growth. So how are businesses doing this? And I think it's fair to say this is quite a broad subject, and there's lots of tools, metrics, and channels that can be used to measure customer sentiment. The examples on the slide that add a little bit more context, and it's probably fair to say it can also seem like quite a lot to ask for from a customer. Now, if we typically think of when a customer places an order or signs up to use a service, they'll be sent some form of confirmation email, followed by the dispatch email or a next steps email. Then will come a feedback request. There could then be a separate NPS request or a broader survey drilling into satisfaction and effort scores. This can very quickly and very easily lead to customers feeling overwhelmed, having a touch of feedback fatigue, and lead to a drop in engagement or a general sense of frustration. You want to be able to find a balance of avoiding that feeling of feedback fatigue while still being able to attain and understand that information from your customers. By using a centralized platform to collect these insights, you create a single source of truth, a vital step in understanding which areas to prioritize. Centralizing your sentiment allows you to accurately map the customer journey, enabling informed decisions regarding your communication strategy. You'll know exactly when to reach out and what message will resonate most. We'll cover these specific areas in more detail in our best practice guide. One of the most important sentiment indicators here is Net Promoter Score, and it's something that every business should be capturing. So what is Net Promoter Score, or more commonly known as an NPS score? This is a global metric used to measure customer loyalty. NPS is a great asset in understanding your customers' behaviors and further adds to their overall sentiment and perception of your business. Most businesses will probably already be tracking NPS in one way, shape, or form. However, doing this separately from your normal feedback collection can contribute to feedback fatigue. It makes customers feel a little bit inundated with multiple requests to give their views and opinions. And then there's the internal element of piecing all of that information together and clearly building customer profiles and defining the right strategy. Feefo were able to capture NPS scores from your customers by adding a simple question into the feedback form that's already been sent of how likely are you to recommend a business to friends, family, or colleagues. I imagine you've probably all come across that question before. The NPS question is then scored on a scale of 0 to 10. The logic behind this scoring will then place your customers into one of 3 categories. To start with, we have detractors, and these are people that left a score of between 0 and 6. They've likely had a more negative experience and may be apprehensive of using your services or products again. We then have your passives, and these are people who have left a score of either 7 or 8. Now, these customers have probably had a more positive experience, how they wouldn't necessarily be viewed as your brand advocates, and they may very easily be swayed to competitors by things like price, availability, or general service levels. Lastly, we've got your promoters. Now, these individuals have left a score of either 9 or 10. And these customers have had a very positive experience and truly are your brand advocates. These customers are extremely likely to return to you and will speak about your business in a positive light. So how does this all work? As you start to collect your NPS scores from customers, you're then able to calculate your overall net promoter score, which is a simple trusted metric. This is scored on a -100 to a +100 scale. Your overall NPS score is calculated by subtracting the percentage of your detractors from the percentage of your promoters. Your overall net promoter score is a great KPI to track and is a key metric to look at when assessing your overall customer sentiment. With Feefo, you're able to add tags in your data, so things like branch, first-time customer, repeat customer, allowing you to drill down into these verticals and see how your NPS score is tracking for different products, customer types, or areas of the business. This will give you an immediate snapshot view of areas to focus on. We'd advocate tracking your NPS on a regular basis, be that monthly, quarterly, or year on year, and keeping tabs on your NPS score, efficiently monitoring changes and acting on this is key in boosting retention rates and also understanding your customers on a deeper level. You should always follow up and engage with customers off the back of their NPS score. And now, if we take a step back and think about the actual NPS question of how likely are you to recommend the business, anyone that leaves a score of 9 or 10 in that scale is essentially saying yes. That's then a perfect opportunity to follow up with them and invite them to join a loyalty scheme, a recommendation program, a newsletter sign up, whatever you feel is most appropriate to allow the customer to build their association with your brand further. Customers who then leave a score of 7 to 8, they are a tricky one. They might be happy, but are they loyal? Passives are likely to leave the moment a competitor offers a lower pricing point or a different benefit. And understanding the sentiment of your passive customers and driving change off the back of this can drastically improve your retention rate and your overall NPS rating. It's key to analyze the feedback from your passive clients, track trends, and take action. We're going to hear a little bit more about how this works in practice from Zach at Discount Coffee shortly. You then have anybody that leaves a score of 0 to 6 on the scale. They could be interpreted as saying no to the NPS question, but again, you should engage with them, you should follow up, and you should understand more as to why they've left that score. What could you have done differently to change their perception? You can also put them through a retention flow where you may want to offer them an incentive to come back and shop with you again, hopefully turning their next experience into a positive one. We'll be including more information on what an effective NPS program looks like in our best practice guide that will be released after today's session. So I'm now going to hand over to our guest speaker, Zach from Discount Coffee. Zach's going to talk a little bit more about their experience of using Feefo and aligning NPS to their core values.
Great, thank you, Connor. Hi, everyone. My name's Zach Chiswell. I'm the Operations Director from Discount Coffee. For those of you who don't know us, we're one of the UK's fastest growing coffee companies. We supply multiple different sectors from hotel groups to large offices and pretty much everything in between. We pride ourselves on being a one-stop shop from everything coffee, tea, hot chocolate, all the way down to coffee machines as well. We also sell direct to consumers with numerous tailor-made products that are designed specifically for this market. So why do we work with Feefo? Well, our name has always been a bit of a sticking point for large businesses and even small independents because, well, although customers want to save money, do they want to use someone with the name discount in the name? I felt that we pride ourselves on offering really industry-leading, exceptional customer service, but the best people to shout about that wasn't us, it was our customers. And with Feefo, we're given that great opportunity. Also, personally, I wouldn't buy anything online without checking company reviews, especially from a brand I did not recognize. And therefore, if I'm doing this, other customers must be doing that as well. So I'm going to do an intro to NPS. Like many of you, for years we've measured on our one success rating, which is the star rating. If you got a 5-star, you celebrate, and if you got 1 star, you panic. But about a year ago, we realized that the star rating, whilst it's important, it wasn't telling us the whole story. It told us about the past, how that delivery had gone. It didn't tell us about the future. Will they actually buy from Discount Coffee again? Today, I'm going to talk about how we switched on the NPS, Net Promoter Score feature within Feefo, and how moving beyond the star rating has helped us to measure true customer loyalty and drive a real growth in our business. So really, good wasn't good enough. So here's the challenge. On paper, everything looked great. Our service ratings are high, our product reviews were solid, but we noticed something interesting and slightly worrying in our data. We had customers who'd give us 5 stars for an order, but then we'd never see them again. We realized that satisfaction and loyalty, they're 2 very different things. A customer can be satisfied, the box arrived on time, that can get you the 5 stars, but that same customer might switch to a competitor next week just because they're 10 pence cheaper, and that is not loyalty. We were great at measuring orders, but blind to the relationship. We had a bit of a leaky bucket on our review data, and it wasn't showing us where the holes were. But we needed to answer that one specific question. They love the coffee, but do they love Discount Coffee? So why do we use the Feefo NPS? Well, we knew we wanted to track the Net Promoter Score for the reasons we've discussed. But the one thing is that how do we do it? So usually companies can send a separate email for this. You know the drill. You get an order confirmation email on Monday, a review request on maybe the Tuesday, and then maybe a further survey on the Wednesday, and so on and so forth. This has led to serious review fatigue in the e-commerce industry, and we have noticed that less people interacting with the more emails we're sending. So we chose the Feefo tool for the 3 reasons. 1, it's seamless integration. It sits right inside the review flow, so the customer is already engaged in the review, they're already filling out the review, so it takes them no time at all just to click between that 0 and 10, and therefore we're getting a much higher response rate than if we sent out a separate form. The second thing is the context. Because it's on Feefo, we can see the NPS score right next to the text review. We get the score, which is the what, and then we get the review, which is the why, all in the one view, so we can really look at the data. And that's the third thing. It's verified data. Unlike a lot of other platforms that you'll see, where people can just enter their own data and upload their own information that might not have been verified customers, with Feefo, everyone that orders from you gets sent a request, and only they can actually give you those review feedback. So therefore, you're getting really accurate data. So we have the data, but what do we do with it? Well, we don't just put it on the screen and that's it. We have to segment our customers into the 3 separate categories, and there's a different strategy that we've built for each. So I'll go through the top ones. So first, the promoters, the 9s and the 10s. They're the engine room of the business. We don't just leave them. We have to identify them through the Feefo platform, and then we have to activate them. These people, can be invited to our loyalty tiers, and we also ask them for user-generated content, things like Instagram posts, pictures of them making coffee, things like this, because these people are ready to share about your business. You just have to hand them the microphone to do so. The interesting ones are the passives, the 7s and 8s. Connor already mentioned that they were interesting, and these are the ones that keep me up at night, to be fully honest. These people are fine, they're okay, but okay is not going to build our business, and it's certainly not going to take us to where we want to be. So we focus heavily on reading through the reviews, because somewhere in there could be something that leads to why they're not giving you the 9s and the 10s. And I'll come on to that a little bit later. Finally, it's the detractors, the 0 to the 60s. These are almost like a fire alarm in our business. If a score comes in a 6 or below, our support team flag it immediately. We want to treat this like an emergency situation where if we can try and solve it as quickly as possible, it can stop that customer from going onto another review platform or onto social media and sharing a bad experience. We want the customer to come back and enjoy time and time and again what we do. So therefore, with this, we're trying to turn it from a PR disaster into a customer service win. So I want to share a real life story of how data has changed a major operational decision for us. So we were looking at the passive segments, the people that are scoring as the 7s and the 8s. And when we dug into the text analysis, we saw a very clear pattern. The product reviews were great. People were giving 5 stars, loved the coffee, but the sentiment around the delivery was dragging our score down. At the time, we were using Every as our main courier partner for our standard parcels. It's very cost effective, allows us to keep our price low for our customers. But the feedback was telling us that there was inconsistency with the delivery that they were receiving. Customers saying things like they love the coffee, but it arrived 2 days late, or the driver left in the rain, which is no good for anyone. If we'd only looked at the star rating, we might have ignored this because the average was still good, 4s and 5s. But the NPS told us these customers were not going to recommend us to their friends and colleagues. So how do we change that? Well, I took this data to the rest of the senior management team and I showed them on Feefo exactly what the customers were doing. And this obviously helped me to justify the higher cost of switching our standard delivery to another platform user, DPD. It was investment, yes, but the result was immediate. We saw that those passive scores had migrated to promoters. Customers noticed the reliability improvement, and we proved that we had a value in our experience, and it built trust. But most importantly, and I think this is crucial for all businesses, we listened to what the customers had actually told us. So what is the ROI of listening? Well, so aside from better deliveries, what did this have on the business impact? Well, since implementing the strategy, we've shifted our focus from just acquisition to also retention. Retention has a higher repeat purchase rate from the promoters because these are people that already love your brand and want to buy more from you. So we've noticed a 15% uplift on pages that have Feefo Trust widgets. We display our star ratings all across our website via the Feefo widgets. And now, thanks to information from the NPS, our scores and our wording has gone up because people are leaving more valuable reviews because they've seen an improvement thanks to delivery. And therefore, that 15% uplift in conversions has been a real good social proof for us. And of course, it's a team goal. Every internal department knows our NPS. We're one team, one goal. This is the biggest win. Every department from the warehouse to the web team knows our NPS, and it aligns the whole company around the customer. Because ultimately, your NPS can turn your customer base into your sales force. So to wrap up, if you're sitting here today just collecting stars, I'd encourage you to look a bit deeper. These are the 3 takeaways to go away from today. Number 1, don't separate it. If you're using other platforms to do your NPS research, maybe look at seeing how you can combine it. By combining it, it's reducing the friction for your customers, reducing that one-step click. Number 2, dig into the why. The score tells you what's happening, but the text tells you how to fix it. And that's the crucial part. And number 3, act on it. If you're going to do all the measuring and get all the data, you have to make the hard decisions, such as changing couriers to improve customer satisfaction. If you don't act on it, the score won't improve. So thanks very much for your time and for listening to my presentation. I hope you've come away with a better understanding to how we at Discount Coffee are using NPS and to help improve our customer sentiment and improve our business operations. I'll hand you back over to Connor.
Thanks for that, Zach. It was really insightful just to hear firsthand how Discount Coffee have utilised the NPS tool to essentially build out a full strategy and drive change. And it's good to hear that you're listening to your customers and that you have taken their opinions as they are and have made that change and have seen the impact as well. So yeah, massive well done, massive well done. I'm going to pass across to Charlie now, who's going to be speaking about the new era of AI-powered sentiment analysis and the landscape here.
Thank you, Connor. So hi, I'm Charlie. I'm the data product owner here at Feefo, and I've been here for a little under a year. And during that time, the data team has been really focused on how we can leverage AI in its continuous evolving forms to get the most out of reviews. And that's been across the board. But today, we're specifically looking at the new era of AI-powered sentiment analysis. Ahead of getting into the thick of it, I'd like to take a step back and provide some context on the historical friction points in traditional review management and how AI has transformed the landscape. So if we move to the next slide. Within the frame of NPS, as Zach and Connor have flagged, it's the industry standard for a reason. It's the fastest way to gauge the health of your business. But an NPS score without any context is like a map without a compass. And that's where feedback comes in. But we're facing somewhat of a modern paradox. In the past, the problem was simply getting customers to talk to us. But today, the problem is we have hundreds, if not thousands of reviews, and teams are simply overwhelmed. And it leads to almost a paralysis because of this volume. And this is where we see 2 common failures in the market: the anecdotal trap where a senior stakeholder reads, say, one bad review and diverts resources to fix a potentially non-critical issue. And the second being the general sentiment trap. You know your sentiment is mostly positive or trending down, but you can't exactly pinpoint the root cause without reading hundreds, if not thousands of reviews, and even then. It's clear that metrics like NPS and average rating are crucial for the state of the nation, but it can't tell you what to fix. You need to break the noise into specific stories to find the hidden drivers behind your ratings. So how do we solve the scale problem? If we move on to the next slide, I'm sure everyone's mind went immediately to AI. And you're right, we have entered a new era. AI has transformed the review management landscape, and it's a space that's continually evolving at such a rapid pace. And it has answered that critical question of how do we handle volume without drowning in data, because it does remove the manual sifting phase and it groups reviews together to surface what are the key topics, the key themes, and it prevents that confirmation bias that often comes in when it comes to reviews, because you're not going in searching for what you expect to find. AI is starting to show you what is actually there. But we have to be realistic. AI is not a magic bullet. The answer is not exclusively more AI. The answer is looking at how that AI is integrated, because ultimately AI is a tool to be leveraged. And if you ignore that integration, you run into two major problems, one being the granularity gap and the other being the reality gap. So firstly, the granularity gap. AI models are inherently designed ultimately to summarize. If you just blanket in AI, it creates too high level of an aggregation, masking the reality. It gives you the big picture, but you miss the fire starting on the ground floor. You need to segment the data to reveal those ground level insights. And this links to the second problem, the reality gap. Generic AI ultimately gives you generic topics. It might tell you people like the service, but where do they like the service? Is that during the booking process? Is that the actual experience? Or is it only when they have a problem and they have to reach out to customer service? Where is it? You don't run a generic business and you have specific branches, unique product lines, and distinct operational needs. AI is smart, but it lacks this context. And ultimately, this granularity and reality gap are symptoms of solutions falling into a wider trap of bolt-on AI. This is when often platforms take a legacy analytics tool and slap on a generic language model, and it treats your data as shapeless. To solve this, platforms must be built on AI. And what I mean by this is that you need to inject your business logic into it to allow for metadata filtering. So for example, through tagging reviews with attributes like branch, product line, date, customer tier, regions, before the AI analyzes them. And by feeding these structural tags into the model alongside the reviews, you force the AI to respect your business structure. So when you analyze the London branch or the summer clothing line, the AI isn't guessing. It's working within the boundaries of your operations and closing that reality gap and delivering insights that are specific, not generic. And this segmentation is what provides clarity. By giving structure, it starts to turn sentiment into strategy. So now that you know what your customers are saying about different areas of your business, if you move on to the next slide, with the advent of AI and how accessible it has become, this is where most platforms are at and where it stopped. But ultimately, sentiment is purely descriptive. It tells you customers are unhappy about delivery, but it doesn't tell you if that unhappiness is actually hurting your bottom line. And this is where the real opportunity lies, looking at the ROI of sentiment. By combining AI with traditional statistical modeling, you can go beyond what people are saying and start to look at measuring exactly how much it impacts your average rating. And this answers potentially one of the most critical business questions. What is the single most valuable problem to solve for the biggest return? And why that's important, obviously we all know, high average rating, brilliant for everyone. But I think what's really interesting is that it only takes increasing your average rating by 0.1 to boost conversion rates by up to 25%. So not only can you make sure that you're fixing problems that are actually hurting your bottom line and not just the loudest, but you can also look at what smaller improvements can be made, the more lightweight solutions to accrue up to this 0.1 stars. So how we've begun to look at that at Feefo, if we move on to the next slide, please, we'll see that AI and traditional statistics we've used hand in hand in our new tag analytics report that's available today for customers. And this hybrid approach bridges the gap between data and action. The AI is fed reviews that are tagged to surface trends, topics that are relevant to different business areas, while the statistics validate exactly how much those trends are impacting your rating. AI then translates this insight data into the language of your teams, and it helps teams move beyond passive review tracking to active prescriptive decision making, whether that is a suggested action based off negative topics to make a change, but also from a positive perspective. By surfacing what's positively impacting your average rating, it's clear that that's what customers care about most. And you can start to use this verified reviews with this data to start to create more material that helps with AI search. So we kind of dipped our toe into it a bit, but diving in a bit more into what this looks like into practice, we'll see in the next slides. So we'll look at a few blueprints for success that we've seen with tag analytics during the beta testing. And these are just some examples from different sectors, but these use cases are not siloed to any individual sector. They can be used across the board, and really the possibilities are endless. With travel and hospitality, what we've seen is the name of the game is isolating operational fixes. If there seems to, for example, be an issue with food quality and you're starting to see it negatively impacting your average rating, you don't have to panic about the whole brand. You can use location tagging to see immediately, is this happening everywhere, or is it just in the north location? If it is just in the north location, you've pinpointed a specific staff training needed instantly, instead of having to overhaul, say, the entire menu or look for new providers. This is a lightweight solution. We've also seen clients tagging specific hotels to build evidence-based agendas for general managers by scheduling this report to them. They can see, for example, if it's small staff training needs with regards to sunbeds, or whether it's a larger undertaking over a period of time to focus on how they can improve road access. And with retail, we've seen something really interesting in the use of campaign analysis. So, for example, by tagging events like Black Friday, Christmas, Cyber Monday, typically very intense periods for retail where it's an all hands on deck situation. And often there's not the time to look back at simply the volumes of data, but they've used this report to have the peace of mind that's doing the heavy lifting for them, because they could isolate exactly where they excelled and where potential improvements could be, either for the next major retail day or use it to inform next year's strategy. They've also used it with regards to internal influence. And what I mean by this is, for example, imagine you're having a conversation with your product director and you say, I feel like we need to fix the packaging. This lacks some legs. But if you're able to say, the current packaging defects are suppressing our average rating by 0.4 stars, that changes the dynamic completely. It turns a subjective opinion into an evidence-based conversation. We'll also look into the insurance sector in the next slide, please. And really here, it's about optimizing channels and people. And this optimization we have actually seen across the board, but with context in insurance, they're using it to tag different service channels. So figuring out if the online experience is outperforming direct calls or vice versa. But they're also taking it a step further, not just looking at, say, the service channels as a whole, but by tagging specific account managers, it's allowed them to filter feedback down to that individual level and provide direct coaching. And in many cases, because it has the quantified impact, they're able to feed this into KPIs. And finally, in manufacturing, we've seen a really interesting bridge between product and marketing. Category managers use tags, for example, to spot regional differences in products to understand why that exactly exists and whether a local marketing campaign can be used to resolve this. But I think where it really stands out is we see manufacturers use immediate feedback to fuel social content. So for example, if the data shows users are struggling with coffee temperature, they don't just wait for a fix in, say, 2 years' time once they've done testing and passed over bureaucratic red tape to get a release. They immediately brief the marketing team to create content on, say, how to adjust your temperature settings. And this solves the user's problem now. Not only does it reflect well to a customer that you're proactively acting on feedback, but because it addresses a specific query, it creates the kind of helpful, relevant material that also drives AI search visibility. So in the next slide, we'll be distilling everything we've gone through into a blueprint from sentiment to strategy. So it's clear that the future of customer sentiment isn't just about reading more. It's about automating that insight by using AI, but using AI as a tool with intention. And how you get from sentiment to strategy is through three key main steps. One is to align your feedback data with your operational structure so that you can reveal actionable sentiment versus generic noise. Next is to quantify the specific rating impact of each topic that is surfaced from the AI. And this allows you to distinguish between loud but harmless complaints and the silent killers. And next is using this impact data to prioritize. This allows you to stop paralysis by analysis and start making evidence-based decisions that actually improve your customer experience. Whilst AI is the answer to handling review volumes, these three steps are what gets the most out of your review data and turns sentiment into strategy. I'll now be passing back to Connor.
Thanks for that, Charlie. Again, very, very insightful to hear all of that information. And it's also really exciting that we do go live with the new reporting today as well. So yeah, I'm sure you will all see a little bit more about that and you'll all understand a little bit more from the best practice guide that follows up as well. But we are going to run into our Q&A now. So thank you everybody for putting some questions into the chat. We'll do our best to answer as many as we can. I've picked out a couple that I've seen come through. There are a couple of questions around NPS of would you recommend using NPS at a company level, a brand level, or an individual product level? I think in my mind, ideally at all of those different touch points, thinking about the Feefo infrastructure, we're able to use tags within our data to kind of specify those particular facets. Doing that allows us to then kind of get an overall NPS score for each individual aspect there. So as much as you can do across the board with the data that you're ingesting in at the start will enhance what you can get out of it at the end. We've got another question on tips for people actually filling out the NPS link, any specific phrasing that may work it if we're sending that out manually. I think in terms of the actual NPS question itself, it is a standard metric of how likely are you to recommend a friend, family or colleague to a business. We need to keep the integrity of that question as well and ensure that that stays the same. But I think in terms of anything kind of engagement related, one of the big things that we see at Feefo is signposting. So ensuring that whenever you're communicating with your customers prior to purchase or even part of the purchasing journey, there is some form of signposting aspect that they're going to be made aware that they're going to receive a feedback request or an NPS request. And doing that as part of the journey, that resonates with customers, so they kind of understand what that ask is when it comes through. So yeah, very much just making people aware that that's going to come out. There was another question, Charlie, might be for you around reporting that pulls out highest and low in scoring. Do you want me to read the question? Yeah. So there's a question that does Feefo have reporting that pulls out the highest/lowest scoring categories by sentiment?
Yes, it does. So with the tag analytics reporting, it segments your data by your different tags. So if you tag category, for example, you could then see each different tag value per category, and it would measure not only the sentiment, the split between positive and negative, but also how much that category value is impacting your average rating. And it also means that you can drill down further to see the actual reviews itself. So again, giving you that context of where the AI has pulled that from.
Perfect, thank you. We've had a couple of questions in general around the user case of B2B in Feefo. I think this is something that we come across quite a lot. We work with a lot of different B2B companies. There's always areas that you can measure feedback requests from, NPS scores from. Thinking of kind of some clients that we work with, it will be looking at their account management service. How healthy are your kind of book of clients that are working directly with you? You can do that by getting a pulse check maybe, so an annual survey or a quarterly survey, something like that, where we're going to be engaging with them, understanding how they're finding the experience of working with you and allowing you to kind of manage any risk going forward as well, and getting a better idea of the health of the business as well and your relationships with your customers. Are there any other questions that you wanted to cover off?
Questions for discount coffee?
There is a question for discount coffee. Do you want me to read it out, Zach?
Yeah, please. Yeah.
So for discount coffee, how do response rates differ between business customers and direct customers?
Yeah, so with the direct customers, their response rate is always higher, I feel. That being because they're maybe used to filling this out, whereas businesses are, normally busy, cafes, things like that, and maybe don't have the time to fill it out. So sometimes we do get quite a lot of good data from our home customers, but when a business does spend the time to fill it out, they can actually fill out some really useful information. So yeah, the split is normally much higher in the home customers, but we do still get some good response rates from business customers.
Perfect. Thanks for that, Zach. We have had another question come up as well about being able to capture offline feedback, so purchases kind of in-store or public transport, etc. We absolutely are able to support that. I think it all depends on how you're capturing that data internally. So if you are storing that all on a centralized system and are able to upload that data to us in one way, shape, or form, we absolutely can support that. Again, it goes back to using tags to highlight different areas of the business and for us to be able to then report kind of off the back of it of who's saying what to give you that idea of what's happening across the wider business.
I've just seen another question come up in the chat, and it seems AI is becoming the new search. Does good Feefo scores help with being recommended by an AI such as ChatGPT? And that is a really good question. Obviously, when it comes to AU search, it really is a black box in terms of no one quite knows how it works. However, we do know, for example, AI takes its data integrity extremely seriously. So if it's seen that it's coming from a verified platform, like Feefo, it does have a heavier weighting because it's able to ground it in reality. But also when it comes to search, it's also about getting your material out there. So whether that's creating blogs off the back of reports, using the fact it's come from a verified source, and then backing it up with statistics, it gives AI a very easy way to read through and kind of highlight, okay, customers love this, didn't like this, but overall they recommended it because of X, Y, and Z. And by giving it the data, it just makes it extremely easy for AI to read it and then to resurface in search platforms such as ChatGPT and Gemini. Because I think that's really flagged something that's really interesting is that search has completely changed. People do use AI search now over traditional SEO.
Thanks, Charlie. I think there's just been another one going for you as well, just to explain that AI models definitely read Feefo reviews.
Yeah, so I think this probably comes from the fact that previously it's been flagged that Java AI can't read JavaScripts in the back end. However, with the new Feefo widgets, that's something that's been actively worked on to make sure that they are crawlable for AI. So that definitely has been a shift within Feefo, and they are pulling through. The reason, for example, why you might not see Feefo appear all the time is because AI is ultimately not deterministic. You can ask the same question 10 times and it might give you varying responses. But again, this links back to the fact that the more you publish with your reviews, the more content you have out there and the more that can be searched. And just highlighting the fact again that it is from a verified source does give it a heavier weighting as well.
Amazing. Thank you very much. I think we've answered as many of the questions that we can in the chat. If anything has gone unanswered, we will follow up afterwards. And I guess all that's left for us to say is a massive thank you for everyone that's joined us today. We really hope you found today's session insightful, and keep an eye out for the best practice guide, which will be released shortly. We look forward to also joining you on our next masterclass as well, where we'll be discussing how to act upon feedback. Have a great rest of the week, guys. Thanks.